Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is Makazi Podcast. This is one of the first of a series of podcasts that we intend to undertake. And this particular podcast is going to be about what we are calling dead capital. And today we have with us on the set Tom Odongo and
Kale Bruto.
And I am Patrick Adolwa, and we would like to engage you in this very interesting phenomenon that has been in the Kenyan social media over the last 1 month. And the topic is dead capital. First and foremost, dead capital is not a unique term in itself. I think it's a term that has been in use for a very, very long time, particularly in societies where capitalism is practiced. But in this particular case, we are talking about a very unique approach to dead capital. Pat, what's your understanding of dead capital? Not to be too scientific about it, just give us...
I can be very pragmatic about this.
Yes.
For me, dead capital exists almost whether we are talking urban or whether we are talking rural. For example, a property that has been developed without intention to generate revenue or to generate revenue can be a dead capital. A property in the rural that has not gone through what we call that way in which we register interest in land, adjudication. Yeah, properties that have not undergone land adjudication and therefore has no clear ownership that can be used even as a collateral or for purposes of you cannot capitalize on the value can be a dead capital. Yeah. And so this dead capital can exist within urban environment and can also exist within rural areas. But I think where the argument is coming from is that there is huge capital that is being put in residential physical investment in urban areas, in rural areas, without intention to use them for generating revenue.
Okay,
that's where the argument is.
I think that suffices for the purpose of this discussion.
Yes.
And people have, people have a limited definition of dead capital for the purposes of this discussion to include only the construction of palatial homes, rural homes, in projects that are not intended for business purpose, they're just residential in nature, and they are homes, so to speak, that people just invest as a social capital, really, not as businesses. What's your perspective on dead capital?
Yeah, I think he makes a good point in terms of being in the scope of property and talking about how people are building palatial homes. But then there's the aspect of even businesses that don't make sense in certain areas. Let's say you build a shop.
Absolutely.
In the middle of nowhere. It could take you 200 years or even more for you to see profit. I think that's a place where you can look at it and say, okay, this goes way beyond houses. It goes into asset classes that wherever, either in an urban space or in a rural space, that doesn't provide value to you.
So dead capital is dead capital regardless.
Wherever you are.
Urban or rural, it's dead capital.
It's dead capital.
As long as it is not properly formulated in terms of business plans and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
And so in this specific approach to discussing dead capital, people have preferred different arguments. There are people who are for it, and they would not even want it to be discussed in this context. They believe that if you choose to build a palatial home, that's a choice that you make, and it should not be the subject of such discussions because it's a choice you make. And you probably know that it is not for business purposes, so you're not expecting such returns. And therefore, There are others who have voiced their concerns, and I don't know whether they should be concerned about other people's investments, but they have voiced their concerns and even shown their prejudices, so, which is why we also would like to discuss this about what they consider to be dead capital in palatial homes, and without limiting it to specific locations. I think it is a phenomenon that is far-reaching. It transcends the region in which it has been associated with in Kenya. So, what are some of the things that we could do today in terms of discussing this concept of dead capital? Is this really dead capital, or is it just a prejudice that poo-poos investments in local areas? Is it some harsh judgment of people who make choices to put capital in places other than urban areas? And that is perhaps what I seem to get from your...
Yeah. I think there are two dimensions to it, Mike, from me. Yeah. One is that it's coming from a group that have got a particular perception about what rural development should look like, and therefore are contesting the trend that we are seeing now as a trend that is not what they were seeing as what should go into the rural, and I think what they are looking at is that people move to other areas to accumulate capital, and then they move that capital into a social commodity instead of turning it, instead of creating a productive asset within their rural areas that would regenerate and be part of wealth creation. And so they are saying generally this phenomena means that the capital is not migrating to this rural in a way that is changing the rural economically.
Okay. It's not reproducing itself.
It's not reproducing itself. I think that is where...
It's a sunken cost.
It's a sunken cost. That's what they are seeing. But at the same time, these phenomena also present opportunities that can be the focus of discussion. Is that, yes, let's say that capital has come here, it is set up in a way that it looks like dead capital. Is there a way in which this can be restructured to become a productive assets? And the answer is definitely yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Certainly.
Yes.
Certainly.
Yes.
Don't you think that there is a way in which this investment can be made to actually reproduce itself?
Yes, I think there is definitely...
Or is it even dead capital indeed?
I think, first, that second question, I'll start with that. I think that's how dead capital is there. And the reason why people do invest in such things, right? Because you have all these cultural pressures, that we have societal pressures. You build a house in a village, the people who you grew up around with. Even
they have to know who you are.
They have to know who you are. Exactly.
And they have to arrive. You see, these are some of the terminology that people use, okay?
Exactly.
You must be seen to have arrived.
It's mainly as a symbol of social power. But that's what it is. But the question is that can it be turned to be a productive asset that perform a different function from that of basically being a symbol of social power?
Absolutely. So you have created your social power. They are artifacts in terms of buildings, structures, other material, things that project you as a powerful person. Okay, and that's an end in itself for a lot of people. Okay, and that's the reason why people are talking about dead capital, because these are not things that, in their current thinking, these are not things that will grow wealth. These are not things that will give you revenues and so on and so forth. So it's just going to be sitting there. But then you're saying that, yes, we need to understand that process up to the point where people have achieved their social power base, and that now they are important people in society, and people, relate to them in that way. They feel that that aspect of their lives has been achieved. Okay, gratification has been achieved. But now we want to see these things from another perspective, because there are those who say it's dead capital, and we are saying perhaps it is not dead capital, really. I mean, there is another way that you could use these things, whatever they are, and that we cannot also keep the notion that we shouldn't be developing this kind of properties in the rural areas. But if we have done so, then perhaps it is an opportunity for us to find alternative use for these kind of properties that at the moment are being debated and discussed.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity as well to interrogate the economics of it all. In the sense that, okay, fine, we can agree on one thing, that maybe building up a house is important, right? But then I think the conversation should go to a place where we talk about how can we convert this dead capital to be something that can be an issue of economics of scale. How can we maybe build industries? How can we build things that help people around the society benefit from it? So dead capital, in a sense, is only dead when it doesn't serve the purpose of generating something new, right?
Revenue,
exactly. Yeah.
This is all about revenue, because in the theory of capital is that you invest and you make returns on investment. That's the whole idea. But since in the first instance the idea was not to invest to make returns on investment, we find ourselves with assets which perhaps could be used to generate capital and revenues and so on and so forth. And this is a debate that we're engaging in, because those who put up such assets have no such intentions. Okay? But while we are here, we are trying to profile the alternative view that indeed this may be seen as dead capital, and yet it has potential to generate revenues if it is put to alternative use, or if its use is extended to include other activities. And that for those who are rubbishing this as dead capital, I think their statements are premature.
I agree with you. And one other thing that can be looked at is that in locations where this phenomena is evident, you will also find that the impact of this kind of investment is that they stir up land market. There are places, parts of rural areas, that there was no land market absolutely. And because of these new investments, you begin to see an active land market, and that begin to show that people have abilities to capitalize the values of their property as a result of these investments that is migrating to the rural, creating value and establishing an active land market. So there are certain dimensions that contribute to economic development, because it doesn't mean that it has to generate. It simply means that it creates a value that can be capitalized. Either I can use that value to access credit that can do something. It may not necessarily directly generate value. Then also there is a if you go to Rift Valley, where land holding is much larger, then you would find that the palatial home is a minor activity relative to the probably
farming
activities that is going on there,
which is a major undertaking.
Yes. So we see the palatial home as support to the productive capacity of the person. It has got
so it is the secondary and the primary activity. That's the relationship.
That's the relationship. But where the land holdings are small is where there is a level of there's a need to be some thinking about how do you transform them to be generators of not just value, but also revenue.
Hold your thought.
Yes, yes.
I see this as a very interesting perspective because I can tell you for a fact that in Luo Nyanza, as an example, the concept of a land market has never taken shape until now that we're talking about palatial homes. And there is an emerging land economy. In fact, a market for properties that has not been there in the last 60, 70, 100 years of Kenya's existence. There are now realtors selling properties in Luo Nyanza, in Nyanza, the Nyanza that we know. That phenomenon did not exist. Just 15 years ago, it did not exist. Completely. So, I mean, there is a way in which these palatial homes have begun to spur interest in land in a manner that has never been seen before. And as a phenomenon, it's quite interesting.
It's quite interesting.
It's quite interesting.
It's quite interesting.
The concern is it a bubble? Do you think it's going to...
Probably not.
eventually-
Probably not. Because, I mean, yes, is it a bubble? I mean, we can tell. But people have not stopped building new palatial homes in these places. And if the kind of advertisements for properties that I see in social media in Nyanza is anything to go by, there is demand for properties in Nyanza. Rural properties are being sold, farmlands are being sold in Nyanza, and people are buying.
I can see the sense of it if you are somewhere maybe close to the lake. That's an attractive piece of land, and there's always going to be demand for that piece of land. But once you build something that's in the middle of Luo Nyanza where there's really no access to natural features.
It's not entirely true, because if you go to places like Muhoroni, you see incredible palatial homes in the sugar belt. Okay, and those homes are extremely amazing homes. You could turn them into anything. You could turn them into retreats. You could turn them into hotels. You could turn them into anything that you want, to capitalize. If you're looking to put them into a productive process system, where now you're getting, returns on investment, you could change them into anything. Okay, and that is why we are saying now that there is potential for extending use for these properties, so that when you're not there, this place can serve as a 3-star hotel. This place can serve as a conference facility, as a retreat for anything you like. And I'm only giving one example. Okay? Yeah?
Yeah. And I'm still also on this, that we need to be very careful how we perceive rural development. Rural development does not have to always reflect backwardness. Yes. The fact that it is beginning to reflect modernization does not mean wastage. Does not mean that there is a concentration on dead capital. I think the dead capital perception is coming from the scale of investment that is going into.
Well, at a personal level, when you see someone with 15 bedrooms
at a personal level, and the asset is only performing social function.
Absolutely. It begs question.
But that does not necessarily give any credit to the argument that rural should remain rural, and the only how rural maintain its characteristics is not to have palatial home. Palatial home should still be there. I think what myself I'll be looking at is that the people who are accumulating elsewhere and bringing in form of palatial homes, are there activities within those homes that have distributive impact? And I think there are.
Because the potential is there.
Because you find that they have employed somebody. And for me, my way of looking at it is that what is financing this is the activity in the city, not the home.
Yes.
Is the activity in the city. So it has got several people who work there. So there is also an element of distributive impact that it is actually giving access to income.
So the label is premature. The label dead capital could be premature. Because if I hear you well, I see you profiling the argument that this edifice by itself requires that you have a gatekeeper, you may have a housekeeper, you may have a groundsman, you may have somebody who is looking after your tractor, you may have somebody who is looking after your chickens and so on and so forth. So if you do an audit of this particular homestead, you will find that there is quite a bit of an economy, even if it is an underdeveloped economy. There are activities. This distributive thing he's talking about is already in shape. It's taking shape. Okay, it may be not. It may be suboptimal, but it nonetheless exists. Okay. And before I go into another aspect that I think is emerging, what is your take?
I think I would like to interrogate this issue with the benefits of this course, right? So the way that the way of framing the idea is that there's it's not a backward thing, right?
No.
But then if you remove if you were to dissect this issue, there's a psychological, there's a societal capital that you're building when you have that home.
Yes.
And then there's the downside of there's lost maybe sunken cost that you might never be able to recover.
Yes.
And so
at a personal level, you may not recover, but his argument, which is not misplaced, is that you've actually generated some employment opportunities for several people in the local place.
So the issue now is
even while not optimizing its use, just in the form in which it is being regarded to be dead capital.
Because it's not different from urban. This particular asset Patrick has put here, he will never recover its value in his lifetime.
But that's not the value I'm looking to recover.
I'm just saying that the situation is not different from rural, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, particularly another dimension, and this one can be anywhere. You would find that access to certain infrastructural services, like for example power, water, or some of those things. You find that the first points that this thing come to are actually some of these palatial homes, and then they begin to give access to very, very many people. So they are also triggers. They are also triggers.
In fact, that is what I was hoping that we would get to, even before we go back to examine how this began to happen, because I think that there is a reaction of sorts to sudden development in rural areas. Perhaps, I suspect, largely attributed in part to devolution. Okay? In part to devolution. Because the countryside has been able to get certain revenues, certain disbursements from national government. It has established county headquarters, and there is a new polycentricism of things, such that money is everywhere and not just in one place called Nairobi. And that people are beginning to react to this new rural development with a bit of comments that may not be accurate. And for example, then hence the terms dead capital and so on and so forth. Yet there's got to be much more in these rural places than we are currently experiencing. Okay? So what is going to be the reaction then? Because these are just the precursors of other aspects, material aspects of development that may manifest themselves. But it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning. It's just the tip of the iceberg. Because hitherto, we did not have that amount of development. So people are reacting to this sudden growth, which is phenomenal growth, and they're beginning to call it dead capital. What happens when many more such developments occur? Because when a place begins to develop, there are manifestations of development which may catch people unawares, and they may want to define them in a manner that is not necessarily accurate. And I'm beginning to think that perhaps we are beginning to define things that we are not used to in a manner that is inaccurate, and therefore we may begin to give labels that are inaccurate. Right?
I think you summarized it so well. And again, we have to give people the credit. They have pointed out this, but I think that most of the social media is not based on some
scientific
knowledge. But you have to credit them. They have actually brought a very good debate.
Yes.
That there is this phenomena, and we're just looking at it. We are not discussing it.
Yes.
We would not even know the potential economic contribution of this if they did not start to criticize, call it debt capital, and all that. So I must say that they are contributing to debate in a very good way. But I think that the other side of it is that supposing rural was generating enough employment and enough surpluses that people then would invest in palatial homes, would this argument start?
Perhaps not. Maybe we should leave it here so that we can have another opportunity to ask this question. And again, perhaps in our next episode, we could consider talking about how best do we turn around these palatial homes so that beyond just being palatial homes, they could double up as businesses as well, whenever it is appropriate. And indeed, there are some homes which have been fallow for many, many years, and they could still, especially for investors in diaspora, they could still serve as live capital. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's all we have for you today. And in the next episode, we are going to try and talk about how to make good debt capital. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.